Varatol had seen many species come and go in his long tenure as an ambassador for the Galactic Federation. Ancient species, with minds honed by centuries, millennia, and even uns of experience, all had their place within the Federation. But humanity, the humans, were new, too young, too volatile, too unpredictable for his tastes. He stood in the observation chamber aboard the Federation's central hub, gazing out at the vast expanse of stars, each one a beacon of a civilization that had learned to control the cosmos, tame the unknown, and shape the future. The Federation was built on principles of reason and order, values that had guided its members for centuries. And here, in the midst of this galactic tapestry, was humanity, a young, chaotic species with an unrefined history. The first time he had encountered a human had been during their official induction into the Federation. Their leader, President Elysia Matthews, had stood confidently before the Council, speaking passionately about their commitment to the Federation's goals. Her words had been convincing, but Varatol had found her speech overly idealistic, too filled with optimism for a species still so raw, so immature in his eyes. Even more curious was how their representatives had behaved in the Federation's chambers. They were loud, animated, almost chaotic compared to the calm, collected representatives of older species. And the emotions. Humans wore their feelings openly, often without the restraint that other species prized. Varatol had dismissed it as a curiosity, a novelty, something to be tolerated but not taken seriously. Yet, as he thought about it now, he had to admit that the humans were quickly becoming a larger part of the Federation's day-to-day affairs. Their influence was undeniable. The Federation's council was filled with human diplomats, scientists, and engineers, some of whom were quickly gaining a reputation for their resourcefulness. But it was still hard for Varatol to reconcile his perceptions of humanity with the galaxy's ancient civilizations. The Federation had endured for countless ages, solving problems that humans couldn't possibly understand. The notion that such a young species could contribute meaningfully was a thought he found difficult to accept. But then came the invitation, an invitation that no one had anticipated. The Federation had been struggling for centuries with a problem that no species had been able to solve: the unraveling, a cosmic force that disrupted the very fabric of space and time, was expanding, threatening to destabilize entire star systems. No technology, no theory, no system of thought had been able to halt its relentless progression. The Federation's most brilliant minds had failed. And now, the Federation turned to the newest and youngest member of their alliance, humanity. The decision was made quietly, in private chambers, far from the scrutiny of the other member species. Humans were invited to lend their assistance, their unique perspective, to the Federation's greatest crisis. And, to Varatol's dismay, they accepted. He was skeptical. To him, the idea of humanity contributing anything of substance to the solution of the unraveling was laughable. They had only just mastered space travel on a relatively small scale. Their technology, though innovative, was crude compared to the Federation's. What could a species so young offer to such an ancient and incomprehensible force? Varatol did not say these thoughts aloud, of course. He understood diplomacy too well for that. But in his mind, the idea of human involvement was nothing more than a fleeting whim. What could they possibly bring to the table that the Federation's most advanced civilizations had not already considered? Still, the human representatives were invited to observe the Federation's research efforts on the unraveling. Varatol couldn't help but feel a slight irritation as he watched their presence grow. He had attended the meetings where human scientists, engineers, and military leaders had taken their seats at the table, speaking in earnest about their intentions to help. Yet, all he could think was, how could they possibly understand what's at stake? Humanity had not yet lived long enough to know the weight of millennia of cosmic struggle. They lacked the calm, measured thinking of the Federation's older members. But despite his skepticism, Varator could not deny one thing. There was something about their unrefined optimism that made him uneasy. The humans, in all their unpredictable chaos, had a way of forcing the Federation to question its own assumptions. And that, he would admit, was a force he had not yet fully come to understand. As the first meeting began, Varator stood at the back of the chamber, observing. The council room was filled with representatives of the Federation's oldest and most advanced species. There was no room for error in such a delicate situation, no room for emotion or untested theory. And yet, standing among them, the human representative spoke not just with science and reason, but with something else. Something Varator could not yet place. Perhaps, just perhaps, they might surprise him. Varator stood in the Federation's central command chamber, watching as the human delegation took their seats. He had been assigned to oversee their participation in the ongoing crisis. The unraveling. His gaze flickered from one human to the next, noting the subtle differences in their expressions. Where his fellow Federation members remained calm and collected, the humans wore their emotions openly. He found this both disconcerting and fascinating. The humans had insisted on taking a more hands-on approach from the beginning, which had raised more than a few eyebrows among the more established species. The Federation's scientists had been studying the unraveling for centuries, meticulously documenting its every manifestation, developing countless theories and countermeasures. Yet none of them had succeeded in halting the phenomenon. To some, the idea that humans, who had only just recently joined the galactic stage, could offer a solution was nothing short of absurd. President Elysia Matthews, a woman whose presence commanded attention, had been the first to speak up in the initial meetings. Her tone was unwavering as she presented their plan. Unlike the Federation's vast array of theoretical physicists and engineers, the humans proposed something entirely different. A pragmatic, almost experimental approach. Let's not overcomplicate things, Elysia had said, standing before the Federation's council. We need a simple, direct solution. We're not here to match your centuries of knowledge, we're here to think differently. And we think we can stop the unraveling by using a method that's unorthodox, but effective. The council had listened in stunned silence. Unorthodox. One of the elder members had asked, his voice skeptical. Your species proposes to solve a problem that has plagued us for centuries. By using what exactly? Elysia smiled, clearly undeterred by the apparent doubt in the room. Human ingenuity, she replied, her voice unwavering. Sometimes the simplest answer is the one that works. We've been facing our own existential challenges on Earth. We've learned how to improvise, adapt, and overcome against all odds. You don't need to trust us yet, but give us the chance to prove it. Varator had found her words disconcerting. He knew that the human race had achieved great things. Landing on distant moons, exploring the unknown depths of their own world, and even establishing a rudimentary interstellar presence. But to face something as complex and unknowable as the unraveling, the notion seemed absurd. Yet, as the humans proposed their theory, Varator began to sense a subtle shift in the room. The Federation's members, who had once spoken in abstract equations and elaborate models, began to lean forward, intrigued. The human delegation's confidence, tinged with a quiet audacity, was something none of them had expected. In the weeks that followed, humanity's team worked closely with the Federation scientists. The approach they had proposed was simple in its core. human ingenuity combined with practical problem solving, applied directly to the phenomenon. No overly complicated equations, no centuries-old theories, just a fresh approach. Varatol remained cautious. The Federation had long depended on its tried and true methods, and no one in the chamber had ever seen anything like the unraveling. What could humanity, so young and untested, possibly add to this ancient equation? Human engineers began to build devices, unassuming contraptions that seemed to have little in common with the complex machines the Federation had created. Varatol watched as humans worked with a sense of urgency, but also with a sense of hope and determination. They were unafraid to fail, and it was this fearlessness that intrigued him. It wasn't that humans were smarter or more capable. They had simply refused to accept the boundaries set by others. Weeks turned into months. The Federation scientists who had initially scoffed at humanity's methods began to notice something strange. Small, almost imperceptible changes began to occur in the patterns of the unraveling. Nothing concrete, nothing definitive, but it was enough to raise an eyebrow. Varatol, however, remained skeptical. He had witnessed too many failures, too many false hopes in his years of service to place any value in these early signs. Still, a small part of him couldn't help but wonder, could humanity really do it? Could they be the ones to stop the unraveling? It was in the middle of one quiet night, under the vast expanse of stars, that Varatol received an unexpected communication from one of the human engineers. The message was brief, yet its implications were immediate. "We've found something." The human's voice crackled through the comms, a slight edge of excitement in their tone. "We've discovered a resonance frequency within the unraveling itself. It's like a wave, something we can tune into." Varatol's heart skipped a beat. A resonance frequency. That sounded impossible. Yet, as he processed the message, a strange feeling began to settle in his chest. Something akin to hope. Though he refused to admit it, he could sense that something was changing, something he could not explain. He immediately made his way to the Federation's central command chamber, his thoughts racing. The humans were onto something. The impossible was becoming real. The unraveling, which had baffled the greatest minds of the Federation for centuries, might finally have a solution. And, just maybe, it was humanity, those unpredictable, chaotic humans, who had found it. The atmosphere in the Federation's central command chamber had shifted. Where once there had been only cautious optimism, now there was a quiet, lingering sense of anticipation. The message from the human engineer had ignited a spark of hope, one that spread through the ranks of the Federation's most influential minds. Varatol sat at the far end of the chamber, his antennae twitching slightly as he listened to the steady hum of conversation. His eyes scanned the room, focusing on the human team, who stood together with an air of quiet confidence. Elysia Matthews was at their head, as always, her expression calm and assured. She met his gaze for a brief moment and then turned back to the Federation's leaders. "We've isolated a frequency," one of the humans, an engineer named Lucas, was saying. "We believe it's the key to stabilizing the unraveling." Varatol's brow furrowed slightly. He had listened to countless theories over the years, and each one had failed to deliver. A frequency. How could something as intangible as sound be the answer to a galactic crisis? "How certain are you of this?" a Gorathian scientist asked, her many eyes narrowing skeptically. The Gorathians had long prided themselves on their mathematical prowess and had been the primary researchers of the unraveling phenomenon. "It's not a certainty yet," Lucas responded, "but we've been able to tune into the fluctuations caused by the unraveling. We think there's a pattern, a kind of resonance. It's subtle, but it's there. And if we can amplify it, we might be able to create a counter-frequency to stabilize the energy flux. The Federation's leaders exchanged looks. Some were intrigued, others remained unconvinced. Varatol, however, felt an odd stirring of interest. It wasn't a solution he had expected, but it was the kind of innovative thinking that humans were known for. They didn't rely on centuries of knowledge or the endless equations that had trapped the Federation's thinkers in an unbreakable loop. Instead, they simply observed and adapted, using their raw creativity to uncover what others had missed. You proposed to create a counter-frequency. A tall, elongated Shorithian asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. And how do you plan to generate such a frequency without destabilizing the entire system? That's the challenge. Elysia answered, stepping forward. We've already begun to build the necessary equipment. The real difficulty lies in calibrating it. But we think the key is in amplifying the resonance, tuning into the unraveling's natural oscillation without disturbing it. If we can do that, we might be able to create a steady pulse that stabilizes the fluctuations. Varatol was quiet, listening intently. There were still many uncertainties, but the idea of a resonance frequency, a harmonic solution to a problem that had stumped the Federation for so long, was beginning to make sense. He'd spent years watching his people toil away with complex algorithms and theoretical models, and none of it had worked. Yet here were the humans, approaching the problem from a completely different angle. And they might actually be on the verge of a breakthrough. He rose from his seat and approached the human delegation, his mind racing. What do you need to proceed? He asked, his voice more measured than before. The humans looked up at him with a mixture of surprise and gratitude, but Elysia's smile remained steady. We'll need full access to the Federation's quantum arrays and a few key materials from the reserves, she replied. We're almost ready to test the equipment. Once we have everything in place, we'll run our simulations and then begin our real-world trials. Varatol nodded. I'll ensure you have everything you need. He turned to face the rest of the council. Prepare the quantum arrays and allocate the necessary resources. This may be our best chance. The room buzzed with activity as the Federation's leaders began to issue commands. Varatol felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. For the first time since the crisis began, there was the faintest glimmer of hope. The unraveling, which had seemed so unstoppable, was now within reach of a solution. One that came not from the wisdom of the Federation's oldest and most revered species, but from the wild, unpredictable ingenuity of humanity. Hours later, Varatol stood in the observation deck, watching the human team work with a focus that bordered on obsession. Elysia and Lucas were speaking with a group of engineers, pointing to diagrams and monitors. The machines they had constructed, simple yet elegant, hummed softly as they powered up. The resonance frequency, if it was real, would soon be tested. Varatol's antennae twitched nervously. He had seen many scientific endeavors fail, and he knew the stakes. If this failed, the Federation's faith in humanity would be severely shaken. But if it succeeded, he glanced back at the human engineers. The same feeling from earlier rose in him once again. Hope, an emotion he had not allowed himself to feel in years. For the first time in ages, Varatol believed that the impossible might actually be within reach. The air in the control room was thick with anticipation. Varatol stood at the edge of the observation deck, his eyes fixed on the human engineers as they finalized their equipment. The Federation's leaders had gathered in the adjoining room, each one watching the proceedings through a series of holographic projections. Elysia Markov stood at the center of the operation, calmly coordinating the final steps. Lucas was adjusting the frequency modulation controls on one of the complex, yet surprisingly sleek machines. The device itself looked far simpler than any of the Federation's high-tech arrays, but Varatol had learned not to underestimate humans. Simplicity, it seemed, was one of their greatest strengths. As Elysia gave the signal, the engineers activated the devices. The low hum of energy filled the room, vibrating through the air. It was a sound that seemed to reverberate not just through the metal and concrete of the command center, but through something deeper, something that touched the very fabric of the galaxy itself. Varatol's antenna twitched as the resonance began. The frequencies the humans had discovered were delicate, oscillating at a pitch so precise it almost seemed like the universe itself was holding its breath. The Federation's quantum arrays, previously inactive, now began to hum along in unison, responding to the frequencies in ways no one had predicted. For a moment there was nothing. No change in the readings, no sign of anything significant. The room held its collective breath, the Federation's leaders watching the monitors with nervous tension. Then it happened. The unraveling. The chaotic energy disturbance that had plagued the galaxy for centuries began to stabilize. The fluctuating readings, which had once been erratic and unpredictable, began to smooth out, forming a steady, controlled pattern. The signal, once jumbled and fractured, was now coherent. Ordered, Varatol's heart raced. The human team had done it. They had found the key. "Look at the modulation," Lucas said, voice barely above a whisper. "It's holding steady. We're stabilizing the flux." A chorus of gasps rose from the Federation's leaders. The Garathian scientist, who had once dismissed the human solution as a mere fantasy, stood in stunned silence, her multiple eyes wide in disbelief. Even the Sharathian, who had initially doubted the feasibility of this approach, was now leaning forward, studying the data with intense interest. Elysia turned to the crowd, a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "It's working," she said simply. "We've found the resonance." Varatol felt a rush of emotions. Relief and something deeper, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope? He had doubted the humans. At first, unable to fathom how they could solve a problem that had baffled the Federation's greatest minds for centuries. But here they were, proving him wrong. Once again, humanity had done what no one else had been able to do. Solve the impossible with creativity, adaptability, and above all, a willingness to think differently. The room erupted into cheers as the Federation's leaders began to exchange congratulations. Varatol stepped forward, his voice calm and measured, but with a hint of emotion he couldn't suppress. "Today, we have witnessed the power of human ingenuity. You have done what no one else could do, what none of us believed was possible." Elysia nodded, her smile widening. "Thank you, Ambassador Varatol. But it was a team effort. Humanity doesn't just rely on the knowledge of the few. We rely on the creativity and insight of many." Varatol couldn't help but be impressed by her words. It was true. The humans, in their modesty and their collaborative nature, had done what the Federation could not. As the test continued to hold, the magnitude of the achievement began to sink in. The unraveling, a galactic crisis that had threatened the stability of countless systems, was finally under control. The Federation would be able to stabilize its quantum communications, allowing for secure, uninterrupted contact between planets. The implications of this success were vast. Trade, diplomacy, exploration, all of it depended on a stable, functioning communication network. And now, thanks to the humans, that future was within reach. Varatol stood in silence for a moment, his thoughts swirling. He had been wrong about humanity. They were not simply a species of chaos and unpredictability. as he had once believed. They were something more, something the Federation had sorely underestimated. And for the first time, he felt something deep within him stir, a hope that, perhaps, the Federation's future would not be shaped by the old ways, the traditional methods of the established species. Perhaps it would be shaped by something entirely new. The days that followed the successful stabilization of the quantum network were filled with celebrations, but also deep reflection. Varatol found himself walking through the corridors of the Federation's headquarters, his thoughts a whirlwind. The Federation was a complex web of species, each with their own strengths, cultures, and ways of solving problems. But for all their advanced knowledge and capabilities, none of them had been able to solve the unraveling, until the humans had arrived. As he passed by holographic displays of the Federation's many planets, each one a testament to the vastness of their collective achievement, Varatol's mind lingered on the humans. Their method, their approach. It was nothing like the traditional scientific methods of the Federation. And yet, it had worked. Where others had failed, humanity had succeeded, and it was something that could not be easily forgotten. He entered the central hall, where the Federation's high-ranking members were gathered. Elysia and her team were standing at the front, surrounded by various alien dignitaries who were eager to congratulate them. Yet, despite all the praise, Elysia remained humble, her gaze flickering briefly toward Varatol as he approached. "Ambassador," she greeted him, her voice filled with a quiet confidence. "We've done it. The Federation's future is secure." Varatol nodded slowly, his antennae twitching as he absorbed her words. "Indeed. But it's not just your achievement, Elysia. You've united the Federation in a way that no one ever thought possible." The alien leaders around them murmured in agreement, their once skeptical faces now filled with respect. The Garathian, who had previously doubted the humans' methods, approached with an outstretched hand. "I was wrong," the Garathian admitted, his voice deep and resonant. "The solution you found was simple, yet effective. I underestimated your species." Elysia shook his hand, a wry smile crossing her face. "It's not just the solution, though. It's the way we think. Humans have a unique way of approaching problems. Sometimes we don't overcomplicate things. We look for what works, even if it's not what's expected." The Sharithian stepped forward as well, his multiple eyes glinting with admiration. "I can't believe it. Your solution has opened up a whole new realm of possibilities for the Federation. We've been locked in stagnation for so long. It feels as if the galaxy is reborn." Elysia's expression softened, and she glanced toward her team, standing together at the back of the room. "We didn't do it alone. We worked together. Humanity isn't just about individual brilliance. It's about collaboration. Working together to solve problems, no matter how impossible they may seem." Varatol watched as the Federation's leaders exchanged more words of praise with the human team. There was no doubt in his mind now. The humans were an integral part of the Federation's future, and their role would only grow as time passed. As the crowd began to disperse, Varatol found himself standing beside Elysia. For a long moment, neither of them spoke, the weight of the accomplishment hanging in the air. "You've changed everything, Elysia," Varatol said quietly, his voice tinged with respect. "The Federation will never be the same after this." Elysia met his gaze, her expression resolute. "That's the point. The old ways weren't working. The galaxy needed something new. And humanity? Well, humanity is ready to lead in ways no one thought possible." Varatol looked out over the gathering crowd, the alien leaders now deep in conversation, their faces filled with a new sense of hope. For the first time in centuries, the Federation was on the verge of a new era. one where human ingenuity, creativity, and collaboration would guide the way. He couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Pride in what the humans had achieved, and pride in the Federation for accepting them, embracing them as equals. But he also knew that the road ahead would not be without its challenges. There would always be those who resisted change, those who clung to the old ways. But with the humans leading the charge, Varatol was confident that the future of the galaxy would be bright. He turned back to Elysia, his expression more solemn now. "Where do we go from here?" Elysia smiled, her eyes sparkling with determination. "We start with what we know. We keep pushing boundaries. And we never stop thinking differently." Varatol nodded, a rare smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. The Federation had changed, and so had he. And together, humanity and the Federation would build a new future, one step at a time.